Hello again. Welcome back. This is MADCAST EP002. And we have a different topic for today. A nice, fresh new topic to sink our teeth into. And that topic is video games. You play them, I play them, we all play them. The reason I want to talk about this is there's been I guess it's not persistent, it's been persistent in my head. There's this idea floating around, and I couldn't tell you where I first came across it, but it's sort of been haunting a small sector of my brain ever since it wormed its way in there. And the idea is that you can treat life like a video game. It's a useful metaphor for going through your life. I guess the origins of it would probably be Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell's writing about the hero's journey and about archetypes. And archetypes are basically just they're just characters. It's another word for character. And this whole notion is very Western. I do think it's in some ways very specific to the West. And I'm saying that in spite of Joseph Campbell's research into other cultures and how they tell people stories about how you should move through your life. And it's not to say that those stories are wrong or they're not to diminish their value. But depending on where your culture arose up out of the earth, where your people were infected with the virus of language. That's a whole other video I'm going to make. Keep an eye out. That'll be another video. But essentially every culture is tied in some way to the land that it grew up on. And this idea, of course, has been perverted by several different groups to justify things. The Nazis were all about blood and soil. The Soviets were all about the motherland. Every culture venerates the land. That's universal. No, there's no single culture or group that has a monopoly on that. But the reason I have to bring it up is because where your human culture arises has a massively profound effect on its entire way of thinking, on the languages that it uses, on the way it views the world. And what Joseph Campbell tried to do is he tried to go all over the planet. I don't know if he traveled literally, but he researched. He traveled mentally. He astral projected himself into all sorts of different cultures and said, what are the commonalities? Are there common themes among different cultures that I can use to craft a sexy academic theory about humanity and life? And I'm saying that facetiously. He was not trying to be sexy. He was not trying to please any sort of academic cabal or anything like that. He was just doing his own thing. Fortunately, he lived in a time when his ideas were received well and he was able to publish a bunch of books, almost none of which I've read. I'll admit that. I've read synopses and summaries. I've tried reading a couple of his books. I got other shit to do. I got other reading to do, okay? That's beside the point. The point is just, the idea of reality as a game goes back to Carl Jung, and it goes back to Joseph Campbell, because these people were the first, in the 20th century, the first Western scholars in the 20th century, make sure all my qualifiers are on point, to really delve into this idea of trying to not necessarily argue that reality is a game, but they laid the foundation for that argument. And the way they did that was they looked at common trends in human societies, and despite their geographical differences, they said, well, there's always these sort of common patterns in using language and stories and metaphor to help human beings to be successful in the context of their birth, in their birth's society, in their life. And that's the same thing as a fucking video game tutorial. It's the same thing as anybody saying, well, if you're born in Siberia, You should probably learn about snow. You should probably learn about how to survive winter. It's that type of shit. It's contextual. It's specific to the area. And I think that this was the beginning of a lot of meta or philosophical ideas about existence as a whole being a type of game, and your soul, yourself, is almost like this entity, this machine elf from the fifth dimension or whatever. Again, pick your metaphor. It's a soul. It's a bloody blue. It's whatever. You're here because you either picked a sort of random start for your character, which is you in a human body, or it was chosen for you, or you chose it. And I think no matter what sort of meta-spiritual framework that you use to interpret reality and interpret what you were before you were born, this metaphor of life being a video game is very useful and very interesting, because what it does is it opens up multiple pathways for different cultures and different peoples to justify their existence according to their own contexts that they were born in. You know, personally, I think whatever we were before we ended up here, we have our memories wiped so that we don't know everything, because that would make the game too easy. If you knew everything about everything, this would be boring as fuck. I mean, imagine playing a game where you're in like developer mode and you can edit the terrain, you can give yourself free shit, you can do anything you want. That'd be boring as fuck. And I want to say one thing too. This is a bit of a tangent, but I need to say it early. This life as a game metaphor is not meant to ingratiate like psychopathic perspectives that like, oh, you can just kill people because it's just a game, bro. Just kill everyone. That's not what I'm saying. Psychopaths play the game on a different level and in a different mode. They are playing a character that is, at best, chaotic neutral. Again, I'm going to lean on the D&D metaphor because it's useful. I'm not a D&D player. I've never played D&D. I'd like to try it sometime. Sounds fun. But viewing life as a game is not a necessarily psychopathic perspective. I don't think that you can equate those two things with any argument that would hold water. My point with this whole video is to say that this metaphor is useful precisely because it's not inherently psychopathic, it's not dehumanizing, it's not anti-human or anti-life, and it's not necessarily an egotistical one. And I think that specifically in the West, which is the current sort of, well, I mean, you could argue it's becoming China now. I was going to say the West is like the number one producer of video games. Maybe we are still. It doesn't really matter. If another culture makes better games and more people buy those games, who cares? If the games are good, if they're gacha games designed to drain your wallet, that's a whole other video. I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm trying to say is that I think that to some extent, whether it was intentional or not, and I don't think it was intentional, I think that video games being as popular as they are in the West it's a kind of morphing or mutation of that Joseph Campbell and Jung idea of the hero's journey, idea that life can be treated like, a garden of forking paths, which is also the name of a book I have on my shelf, and I'm not going to tell you who wrote it. You're going to have to look it up. But life is a series of paths, and there are optimal and suboptimal ones, and death is sort of this re-rolling of your character if you didn't like where you were. Again, I'm not trivializing life. I'm not trying to encourage anybody unalive themselves because they don't like where their character is. That's not my point. My point is that this whole metaphor, it seems to have been embraced by the West, and its effect hasn't been what it could have been. And I think I think that escapism is important. I think escapism with video games, if you just need to blow off steam and de-stress, that's fine. I mean, the fucking #1 video game platform is called Steam. Why is it called Steam? I gotta get a bit schizo here. It's because you're blowing off steam with it. You're venting excess heat from the motherboard of reality, from the computer, the giant computer of reality. If you need to blow off steam, you go on Steam. Shakespeare once asked, "What's in a name?" What's in a name? A lot of things. Metaphors? Secret codes? Ooh. Who knows? But whenever I use steam, I think of that. I think of, this is blowing off steam. This is a vent or a coolant device for society. That's metaphorically how I look at it. I can't help it. Because I'm insane. But essentially what I'm trying to argue here is that the West and its sort of addiction to video games, the idyllic perspective would be that games would function like heroic narratives and novels functioned in the past, which was to motivate people. When somebody read about Odysseus 2,000 years ago even, they would think, well, my little petty struggles in my life, if Odysseus went through all this crap, surely I can get my wife to be a better cook, or I can do better in my business, or I can make more money, or whatever. It's meant to be a motivating thing. These stories are meant to be motivating. Video games, I think, at their best, accomplish that. They motivate people to overcome real-life struggles by providing them with a virtual arena that they can project their emotions and their hatreds and fears and their energy into temporarily, so that when they kill the boss in WoW or whatever the fuck it is, then they're like, okay, now I can confront this real-life thing. It's like medicine, mental medicine for like autistic people. You could look at it that way, I guess. But the problem is the escapism angle has really taken over, and a lot of people are just sitting on their ass playing games without using those games as what they could potentially be used for at their best, which is as a source of motivation and a source of like not ego boosting. What am I thinking of? Morale boosting, I guess you could say. I mean, I hate to use morale because it's a term associated too much with the military. Morale is important. It's more important for the non-military. The military personnel, you're supposed to just follow orders no matter how fucked up you feel. But the average person in the home country, whichever country it is, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, China, the US, Australia, wherever, the morale of your populace at home is actually more important. Because if you have to have a civil war on your hands while you're fighting other wars, it's pretty inconvenient, isn't it? It's not good. You don't want that. You don't want civil war. It's not very civil. It's funny we call it civil war. Why do we call it civil? Yes, it takes place in the homeland, but war is never civil. Let's just put our cards on the table here, okay? Anyway, I think that a lot of people have become addicted to video games as more of an escapism than as an idyllic way of projecting their real-life desires into a virtual arena where they can confront those desires in a safe space, you might say, so that their victory in the game provides a source of motivation psychologically that they can then carry out into real life. And again, if you need video games to do this for you, that is potentially unhealthy. I'm not going to judge. I've had moments in my life where I felt like I couldn't do something, and I intentionally was like, at first it was unintentional, but then I very slowly recognized, like, you know what, if I beat a really hard game, I'll feel a bit more courageous and a bit more motivated to confront this real life situation. And I wouldn't knock anybody for doing that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think unless the video game is taking over your entire life and you're blowing all your money on it, if you can kill a boss in Elden Ring and then pass an exam because you've motivated yourself just by accomplishing a goal, just by looking at what you've done, even if it's just pressing keys on a keyboard and clicking your mouse. If that's a source of motivation for you, then it's a source of motivation for you. You should use it. I've used it in the past, and it's worked. I still use it every now and then. There's better sources of motivation, yes, but everybody's on a different level. Everybody's character has different stats in this game. And this video is kind of all over the place. I'm not really being as organized as I was in the last video, which was, it was already minimally organized. But I guess my points are this. Number one, I'm trying to link Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell to the sort of initial philosophical and critical basis for looking at life as a kind of game, regardless of where your character spawns, whether you're a Guatemalan or an Australian or a Chinese guy or an American woman, whatever. You have certain advantages and disadvantages based on where you were born. If you're born in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, as a 5-year-old in a district that's starving, you might have picked a difficulty that's a little too hard. Again, that's the problem with this whole metaphor, is anybody could criticize it on a moral basis and go, well, you're just being a psychopath. What about all the people who are dying? What about all those people? I don't know. This is not meant to be some espousal, some grand espousal of the idyllic perspective that life is a game. I'm just talking about the idea. I'm not throwing my weight into it as a supportive thing. I'm just discussing the nature of the idea. I'm not morally evaluating it. I'm not judging the idea. So if you want to criticize it, this is not relevant. Your criticism is not relevant to this video because I'm not myself criticizing it on a moral basis. So if you want to do that, make your own fucking video about it. That's all I have to say about that. But again, my point is just, number one, there was a philosophical basis, I think, established by Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and probably a dozen other authors and philosophers and critics, etc., that kind of, I think, unintentionally or maybe intentionally popularized this idea of trying to look at life in this way, as not even just a game, but like a journey of goals, which is really every game. Every game you play, whether it's chess or Diablo 4, it's a sequential series of goals, and your character levels up based on goal completions. That's you could argue that's life, or it's a good way of looking at life. That's my first point, is that they sort of established that, Campbell and Jung. My second point is that in the West, the escapist value of video games, which has its own value and has its place, as a steam vent for stress, let's say. Stress is probably the best thing to associate with the steam vent metaphor. If you're stressed out after a day of work and you just want to play a fucking game, the West has sort of leaned too far into that relative to interpreting games as something that is as a medium that has a lot of value for motivation and morale, no matter what the economy's like, no matter where you were born. If you can afford a $5 game that you can play for thousands of hours, if you can buy Minecraft or Terraria for, I don't know, $20, whatever they cost now, you can provide yourself with a means of socializing, you can provide yourself with a means of motivation through completing goals virtually that you either couldn't do in real life, number one, because they're impossible. You can't build a giant-ass castle, which I've built in Minecraft 100 times. Or you can't kill a demon in real life. You can do it virtually, and you can motivate yourself by witnessing yourself complete that action, by actually following your own progression through the game. Because games are, again, you're projecting yourself into the game no matter what game you're playing. It doesn't matter if it's Master Chief with no face or a very specific character who looks nothing like you. The value of games is that they are a virtual manifestation of this perspective on reality, which seems to be pretty fucking solid. Like, if I had to pick a system of metaphor to interpret reality with, I wouldn't pick a religion, because every religion is too specific. It's a single path. You follow this path or you're damned. I don't think anybody wants to be that restricted in their life, because we all have very different desires. And when you try to create a very narrow path for people, even if it's the path you think is perfect, you think it's the only way. And every religion has its founders, every religion has its founding groups. And for the times they were founded in, maybe they worked great. You know, I'm not an anti-religious person. I'm not an atheist. I'm a deist. If you want to know, I do believe there's something, but I don't believe humans have the capacity to define God. I don't think that human beings are smart enough to be like, God is like this, and he wants you to do X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't matter that the X, Y, and Z I just told you is also what I want you to do. That's just a coincidence. Okay? That doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It just means that people are assholes and want to manipulate each other. As if that hasn't been a thing forever. So I do think you should believe in God. I think you should find a reason to convince yourself to believe in God. I think it's good for you to do that. But I don't think you should follow any religion unless it magically, or just conveniently, maybe there's a religion that fits perfectly for you. That's great. Follow it. Go. Do it. Do it. Be Zoroastrian, be Buddhist, be whatever. If it works for you, then it works for you. You know, there's more than one path to God. I don't want to wax religious in this video. I'll probably make another video on religion later on, but so I don't want to get off topic here. More than I already have, which is, for most of this video, I've been off topic. Anyway, point 2 was just, video games are great as an escapism, but the best way to use them is as a self-motivating thing. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is where we do get religious. We do get a bit spiritual. But the third point I wanted to talk about is religions co-opting this narrative of reality as a sequence of goals. And it's not just religions that do this. It's a-religious cults. It's fandoms, corporations, any big group that wants a lot of people to think in a way that is profitable to that group will utilize human psychology in the same way that a religion does. And they'll do it by saying, here's your path forward. You have to buy only Dyson vacuums. You can't buy any other type of vacuum. If you do that, you're a heretic. If your house isn't filled with Dyson products, if your hairdryer and your air purifier and your vacuum are not all made by Dyson, they're not approved by Saint Dyson, then you are a heretic to the Dyson religion, and you are now banished. That's the mentality, and it's just another entity, it's another group trying to co-opt that aspect of human psychology. It's trying to make you into a consumer that's loyal to a brand. A brand is no different than an icon. It's no different than a religious symbol. It's no different than a church. And people have made this comparison for years. This is not a new thing. I'm not breaking new fucking ground saying this. People have made comparisons with capitalism as a system to churches. I don't think capitalism is inherently evil. I think it's an aspect of human psychology that's manifesting on a grand scale because it's true. And the same thing's true of other systems. There are aspects of the human brain that when you have a ton of humans on the same rock, whether it's a flat rock with a lens over it underwater, or whether it's a cube or a sphere, it doesn't matter. You have a whole bunch of people who think the same way. They're going to produce a system, not through some magical new age manifestation thing. They're going to literally and they're going to physically create what they collectively want. And capitalism exists because we want it to exist. It doesn't exist because some evil capitalist tyrant imposed it on innocent innocent farmers. That's not why it exists. It exists because we all wanted it to be here, and we acted according to that desire. Because the exchange of goods is just an exchange of energy. It's an exchange of information. It's just part of the computer of reality. Energy flows between one circuit and another, one transistor and another, between the CPU and the RAM. That's my gamer nerd fucking metaphor for this shit. Criticize it all you like. It's nerdy as fuck. I understand that. When I was a kid, I looked out of an airplane window. I was like 6 years old, and I said to my parents, "It looks like a circuit board, this city that we're flying over." Because my parents used to let me take apart computers as a kid. So that's my frame of reference. That's a personal thing. It could be complete bullshit. You know, don't take it as some kind of gospel truth or anything close to that. All I'm saying is that the systems that we have are in place because we wanted them to be here. And blaming a system for the dissatisfaction of the people living in it who created it is kind of stupid. If the people running the system are inept, that's one thing. That's what the US always does. It blames everything on taxation or on whoever the ruling person is. The US never blames themselves. They never blame the people. The people are perfect. A government by the people, for the people, and of the people, that's automatically perfect. Because people are perfect. Does that sound smart? Does that sound correct? I don't know. I don't think people are perfect. I don't think rulers are perfect. I don't think systems are perfect. I think assigning blame to one group out of those three things is probably retarded. It's almost like you should assign blame proportionally where it deserves to be assigned. You shouldn't default to a single way of viewing the world. But again, going back to my third point, religion's co-opting the video game narrative. This is never going to stop. It's never going to end. And if religion dies out completely, it'll just be corporations and companies that pick up the mantle of doing that. And I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. I can't make any predictions. I'm not fucking Nostradamus. But I do think that there's a sort of universalizing impulse that this metaphor of life as a game kind of offers to its adherents or the people that want to interpret life this way. And the metaphor is attractive because it offers its aspirants or its adherents or the people who believe it, it offers them this easy path forward as a succession of goals. And if you fail a goal, you can just change, you can just respec your passive points in PoE1. You can just try a different path. I like that. I like that fluidity, that life is not this rigid single path, because people are not the same. If everybody thought and behaved exactly the same, like that part in A Swiftly Tilting Planet, where the main characters go to the creepy dimension where there's a single brain, and you see all the houses, all the Americana picket fence houses, and all the kids come out and they bounce a ball, and it's exactly the same. Everyone's exactly the same. They're thinking exactly the same. And then one kid doesn't bounce the ball right, and his mom rushes him back into the house. Oh my God, he's committed a thought crime on a level that is far more terrifying than Orwell. If you want to read a book that uses Orwell's ideas and makes them even more terrifying, Swiftly Tilting Planet is a horror novel. That shit is... Lovecraft would have nightmares reading A Swiftly Tilting Planet. Swiftly Tilting Planet is fucked in terms of its implications. But looking at reality as a game implies that there have to be rules, there have to be restrictions, there have to be certain things that you can't do. But I don't think those rules are imposed by people. I think they're inherent to the system. They're built into it. You can't live forever. That's one rule. You can't have godlike Dr. Manhattan powers and reshape matter just with your thoughts. Like that's obviously, you can't go into God mode. That's a rule. I think any human society that aligns its rules with the rules of reality generally lasts longer. And it generally has a happier populace. But the problem is people don't want to behave according to those rules. They don't want to play the game the way it's meant to be played in Vidya, the way it's meant to be played. They want to play it on their own terms. And I guess my fourth point is that there's a need for some degree of self-determination. And that's why societies that allow their people to invent their own constraints for existence, to invent their own habits, to come to their own self-determined way of existing, those societies are usually more successful than the ones that just say everyone's going to get up at this time, you're all going to go to work at this time, we're going to have everybody do the same shit. The reason that doesn't work is because you completely deaden the minds of people that could provide your society with incredibly important and beneficial insights. You mentally geld them to the point where they can't express those ideas without fear of imprisonment or punishment or death. Essentially, I'm saying free thinking has to exist, and that doesn't. The problem I have with like the whole free thinking and free thought and anarchy versus stricter systems is that people think that they're mutually exclusive. They think that because you have free expression, free speech, free thought, that you can't that's madness, it's anarchy. There's no constraints. How can you have a society where the higher-ups have not imposed some default constraint on their own people? That's madness. There have to be some constraints, like you can't go around killing people, obviously. But to look at free speech and free expression and say, well, that's too dangerous. It's like, well, you're empowering people to construct their own constraints for themselves, for their playthrough of reality. Again, I got to reference Path of Exile 1. I've just been playing that game a lot. That's why I'm talking about it. But Path of Exile 1 is amazing because initially it's overwhelming. It gives you all these options, and you're like, oh my god, I have choice paralysis. What the fuck am I going to do with this character? But there's guides floating around. Because there's an internet where people can post those guides. They're not constrained. They can say, here's my build for Path of Exile 1. Here's my way of navigating reality. If you do this, you'll probably succeed because we've looked at how the game functions, and here's a build for you. Religions in the past did the same thing. They said, well, if this religion came about 2,000 years ago, and this was the way to not die, here's the advice for that era. The issue is, old programming in people's heads is incredibly difficult to rip out and replace with new programming. People are stubborn, and we're stubborn because when we find something that works, we attach ourselves to it because it's conducive to survival. So to try to argue to someone that their worldview is harming them and they're blaming all the ills of their life on other things when it's actually their outlook or their worldview that's harming them, it's almost impossible to convert someone. I mean, you almost can't do it. You just have to kind of let them rot, which is very fucking sad. It's one of the most depressing things about reality to me. Is I'm not some type of like wannabe savior. I don't want to go around helping people to improve their lives. I don't have the knowledge necessary to do that. But I do understand the problem. I understand that it's a problem of stubbornness and old programming that worked in the past and that has persisted because it worked consistently to enough of a degree. Enough of the advice or enough of the ideas in a religious program, for example, like Christianity, enough of those ideas are still valid and they shouldn't be discarded. They should be maintained. But there's a whole bunch of them that probably shouldn't be. But how do you convince people to discard these ideas and accept other ones? It's a nightmare. It's almost not worth your time. But I think that if we have a future globalist society that's not a totalitarian nightmare, that's not a George Soros vampiric hell, it will probably rely on the metaphor of life as a game. And people who were born will be told when they're children, not that they were chosen by God or blah blah blah. They'll be told, "Hi, here you are. You've picked a character in this game. You don't remember that you picked this character, but you chose to be here. Because of your choice, you will struggle and suffer in ways that we can't predict. But it's not your fault you predicted this, or that you put yourself here. You chose to put yourself here because you wanted a certain experience. And this game is not final. You are not. You're not going to hell. You're not going to heaven. You know, I do think reincarnation is a much better system than telling people they're going to go to eternal boring paradise or eternal torturous hell. But hell and heaven are both boring. I'll say that. They're both boring. Oh, there's a myriad of tortures. If you're in hell for eternity, you're going to get bored of the tortures. You're going to be numb to them. You're going to become what's the term? Keeps thinking dissociated. What the fuck is the term? You're going to become numb to them. And the same thing's true of heaven. The idea of heaven. Oh, you'll worship God for eternity. Well, that'll never get boring. If you're a thinking, conscious individual being, of course it's going to be fucking boring. Either realm is going to be boring. If you're reincarnating, though, at least you get a different experience. Even if you reincarnate as a caterpillar, at least it's a different thing. And that's where sort of the Eastern philosophies kind of merge with the Western ones in terms of conceiving of life as a game. They have a respawning. It's like the East, and I don't want to diminish Eastern philosophy or religion or people by saying this, but I'm going to say it. It's like the main thing they got right about the life as a game metaphor is just, oh, you respawn. Like, that's the one thing they really got right, is like, well, we figured out that if you die, you will respawn at the respawn point of your choosing. That's what they figured out. Whereas in the West, we're like, well, we have to min-max game mechanics. Like that, like we got nerdy about it, you know. Before nerds were even a thing, we were nerding out about it. And again, I think if there's a benevolent version of globalism, if there's a way to unite humanity, which I would love to see in my lifetime, that would be fucking great. I don't think it's possible. I think it's an idyllic fantasy. But if it were possible, I think maybe the whole looking at life as a video game thing might be the way to do it. Yes, it's utilizing illusion, which I don't like. I don't like illusions. I have to give a virtual spiritual brofist to Plato for talking about the ills of illusion. But this whole video is kind of an anti-Platonic video. It's kind of me saying, look, illusions are just like stories. A story is not a real event, even if it's a chronicle of a real thing that happened. What a story is a record of that event. And people basing their motivation in their lives on a record of an event is no different than someone playing a video game and being motivated by killing a boss in WoW. It's the same fucking thing. Humans are smart enough to look at a virtualized scenario and derive real personal motivation and get their fucking chemicals in their adrenal gland flowing based on something that isn't real. And they know it's not real. They're not that stupid. Some of them are. But my point is just that illusions are not inherently bad. Well, I think Plato, what he was really trying to say was he was trying to say, look, we should be careful about which illusions we use. I'm mischaracterizing Plato. He wasn't saying all illusions or all poetry or whatever was bad. What he was saying was that poetry should be motivating. I agree with him on that. But I also agree that depressing tragic things, and again, tragedy was one of the two genres of plays in ancient Greece, in Plato's timeline and culture of origin, his time period. You either had a tragedy or a comedy. And tragedies are meant to be lessons, they're also meant to be instructive, but I think there's also a catharsis there, where if you're going through a tragedy in your life and you see somebody else going through one, it's the same thing as listening to a sad song on Spotify. You derive some emotional catharsis, you allow yourself to weep. I do this with Spotify because I have trouble crying, and I don't think it's gay or effeminate to cry. I think as a guy, even if you're working out 3 hours a day, if you haven't cried in like a month, do something that makes you cry. Crying is not a performative feminine thing. It's a biochemical objective release of, there's literally chemicals in your brain that accumulate when you're stressed. And when you cry, you're physically purging them. It's like taking a shit out of your eyes. If you don't cry every now and then, it's not really good for you. Back in the day when we were in caves, we would cry all the time when somebody died or whatever. We weren't on a bunch of drugs that suppressed our emotions. You should cry now and then. Force yourself to cry. It's good for you. You'll feel better for the next like 2 or 3 days. It's better than coming. It's a big deal. I recommend it. I don't recommend you do it performatively. I wouldn't do it on one of these videos. You're not going to see me cry. You got to pay extra for that. You got to join my OnlyFans. My OnlyFans is just me crying. It's me coming out of my eyes, shitting out of my eyes. That's my OnlyFans. It's $50 a month, by the way. That's the minimum subscription to see me cry. You're going to have to pay a lot for that. I charge a premium for that. This is bad enough that I'm giving you this for free. I shouldn't even be doing this. But anyway, rubber banding back to what I was saying 10 tangents ago. I think that the West has overvalued the escapist quality of games, and in doing so, it's not just that they're wasting their time; it's that they're undervaluing the motivating aspect of video games. And I think the East has some points to make about reincarnation. I guess if I had a fourth point in this video, it would probably be that the East is also trafficking in these same sorts of ideas, and that's why if there's ever going to be a globalist society, I guess that's part of point 4. Point 4, I guess, in this video, again, I'm coming up with this shit as I go, guys. I'm improvising. There's no document of notes open on my screen right now. I don't have a fucking Word document open, okay? I'll open one now and show you what my screen would look like if I did. There. Oh, I've got dark mode on. That's not going to convince anyone. Anyway, there. Woo! Look how my face is changing. I'm going from tragedy to comedy before your eyes. Anyway, I don't have notes for these videos. I'm literally just riffing. But I guess my fourth point would have to be that I would like to see an actual union of humanity. That would be amazing. That would be a fantasy. And I think that the video game metaphor has potential. That's my fourth point. We're going to try to do 5 points for all these videos. That's a good number, right? Satanic pentagram 5. Here's the Satan sign. You guys like that? Look, I'm winking my eyes. All that fucking bullshit. Doesn't mean fucking anything. Well, celebrities cover their eyes. It's just another cult. It's no better than Heaven's Gate or Jared Leto's sex cult. It's a bunch of horse shit. It doesn't mean anything. It means what its interpreters want it to mean. That's it. I'm not afraid of that shit. Why would you be afraid of the evil Satanists of Hollywood? There's just as many school teachers messing with children as there are celebrities. There's just as much evil evenly distributed everywhere. California burning down right now is not God's wrath. It's incompetence. It's a shit government, and it's a bunch of eucalyptus trees, and it's a bunch of bullshit about a fish and about not doing controlled burns. That's all it is. Anyway, enough about that crap. My point is that if there is a globalist sort of system, I think the video game metaphor is a very good idea. I'm not a friend of anybody who wants that system, but I'm not an enemy either. You know, I take these D&D quizzes now and then, and I always come up as lawful good. I think I'm actually chaotic neutral. At least if you get some of this into me, and I start spouting true shit, I start dropping truth bombs. Ooh! We dropped 10,000 truth bombs on Russia. We set up our truth bomb launchers in Ukraine. They did a very good job. They're very good. The truth bombs, they did their work. Russia's suffering now because we're telling them the truth. They can't handle it. They're going schizo. They can't handle the truth. Nobody can. It's like Jack Nicholson said in that movie. If you can't handle the truth, get out of the kitchen. That's what he said. I'm sure that's what he said. I'm sure that was the line. Anyway. I mean, I'm pretty much done with the video. I want to make one more point. To get to 5 points here. My fifth point is, it has to do with the utility of this video game versus, this video game, not versus life, this video game life metaphor thing. I think it has potential to unite the planet if it's done right, if the right people are in charge of it. That's always the catcher. If the wrong person is in charge of anything, it can be a perfect plan, you can have all the resources in place, and if somebody fumbles the ball, they fumble the ball. And maybe they only have one chance to do it. Who knows? But if you could create a system in which any person with any set of values could contribute to that system in their own way, and their contribution, however exotic or strange, could somehow be converted into a universal form of energy or currency, that would be amazing. And a lot of people think this is apocalyptic. A lot of people think, oh, if society ever unites and we have actual peace, then that means in the end times. Who told you that? Some warmongering priest from the year 900? Oh, if war ever ends, then my profits will end. Hello. Hello, everyone. Carter Pewterschmidt here. If my war profits end in the year 800, then that's basically the apocalypse. We better tell all the followers. Call my friends in the church and tell them that if war ever ends, my profits will end. Well, no, don't tell them that. Tell them that world peace would actually be apocalyptic. Tell them that the Antichrist would show up, because my profits would diminish. We're a war-mongering monarchic society, so if my profits go away, that's basically the apocalypse for me. So it should be the apocalypse for everyone. Fuck them. That's that whole Christian thing about the mark of the beast and all this crap. When credit cards came out in the 70s, people were saying this. Credit cards are the mark of the beast. Oh, I'm insane. Unless your pay-pig base believes that, you shouldn't be espousing that type of shit, because it's wrong. It's not true. There's no beast. The beast is distributed evenly among all of us. We all have a sand grain of the beast in our fucking souls. The beast is not some external thing. It's not the Balrog from fucking Lord of the Rings. Like, what are you on? I feel like the legalization of weed has driven everyone nuts. It drove me nuts for a while. I was on weed for a while. I gave it up because it was fucking driving me nuts. Careful with that shit. It's not nothing. It's hardcore shit. But again, I guess to round off my fifth point, scuffed as this video has been, it's been a fucking nightmare of tangents, which is going to be most of these videos, guys. I'm warning you now. They're just going to be me voicing thoughts that are totally fucked. If you want to know what it's like to spend a day in my brain and have to try to organize yourself to exist in society, despite the intervention of various drugs, just listen to these videos. It's what it's like to be me. It is fun. But it also is what it is. So again, to round off that point, if you could create a system that was globally appealing, I think it would have to exist on this. Fuck, this wasn't even my fifth point. This is my fourth point. My fifth point was going to be this. I'll go over it very quickly. My fourth point was about the whole globalist system thing. My last point, to get to my minimum 5. We're gonna set a constraint for these videos, guys. See, because I've been allowed to freely speak and think, I'm now coming up with my own constraints. Can you see the process happening in real time? I'm now saying, all right, next videos I make on this playlist, I'm gonna have to have 5 points to say about a subject. I'm gonna have 5 arguments. There. Proof that the system of free thought actually fucking works. My fifth point was going to be that there's a lot of creepy organizations like the Masons and all their affiliate groups that look at reality like a game. And the Masonic checkerboard is a reference to that. The black and white checkerboard that you see, the Illuminati checkerboard, it's just saying reality's a game. And it's not saying that in some kind of Patrick Bateman psychopath ingratiating type of way. It's not saying you could just kill anyone because it's just a game. It's saying, well, whatever you do, there's consequences. You know, there's physical laws in place here that are almost like rules. The laws of physics and mathematics are almost like the rules of the game of reality that you're in. And you can placate your emotional, illogical side of your mind by translating mathematical truths and laws into game rules, metaphorically. So you can look at reality like a game and it will keep you sane. That's the real fucking secret. The real secret isn't brotherhood and sucking each other's cocks and giving each other political favors and shuffling and laundering money around. The real secret is, if your emotional side is fucking with you, because your logical side understands the rules of reality, but your emotional side doesn't, you have to tell your emotional side it's just a game. That's how you stay sane. That's the secret. They won't tell you that, but I stole it from them. I didn't steal it from anybody, guys. It's just up my, I'm talking out of my ass. Anyway, that's the second video, guys. It's done. Thank you for watching. I hope you derived some kind of enjoyment from this, from my random ranting. It's nice not to have a second person who's going to interrupt me. It's nice to jack off my ego a little bit. Maybe I need that. Maybe everybody needs it, now and then. Again, that's why I make these videos. It's in part to talk to myself. It's in part to do a sort of journalistic and diary, virtual diary type of thing. You know, if you liked it, great. If not, go fuck yourself. And with that having been said, as always, peace out.